Hey people, welcome back to the channel. This is a story in which Madara is Naruto's grandfather. He implanted his and Hashirama's cells into Naruto and trained him, which made him extremely strong. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment if you want to suggest fanfic. Check the description for credits and support the creator of the story. So let us begin. Chapter 29. The sage Naruto was alone meditating within the forest of death. He had used his Mokuton to rebuild the forest he had nearly burned down. Well, Sasuke had asked for it when it happened. And he needed to help Sasuke continue to learn to control his Susanoo. Another thing was that fighting against the Mangekyo Sharingan kind of excited him. He knew that one with the same eyes with him would be able to put up a match. To Sasuke, there was the case of the cursed seal, which increased his power by a large portion. And with how the Uchiha controlled the cursed seal, it was just a recipe for a good dance that he could not afford but to enjoy. He needed to calm himself a bit since he was getting too excited. He could not contain the excitement he felt in his body. Someone who has never been defeated before, someone who is hailed as a god, was coming to him. He would finally have that battle where he could go wild and still his opponent would remain standing. It was very exciting for him, to say the least. He was going to enjoy himself, and the more he thought of the upcoming battle, the more excited he became. Nagato is about to reach that place, Zetsu reported as he appeared from the trunk of a tree. He noticed Naruto's position and figured the blonde was waiting patiently for his battle with Nagato while he tries to contain himself from blowing up things around him in sheer excitement. Good, Naruto said, standing. Zetsu nearly widened his eyes when he sported something like a grin on Naruto's face. Had he been someone else, he would have been probably gaping after seeing the grin on Naruto's face. The blonde rarely smiled, and yet he was grinning, a bit twistedly at the thought of battling pain. I fear for the landscape seeing that look on your face. What you did in Kiri will be nothing compared to what you will be doing with Nagato, Naruto. Zetsu said, looking at Naruto. He was sure the blonde was going to do some more explosives jutsu with Nagato. He was sure that most of the jutsu would be too wide and wild for Nagato to absorb them. There is nothing to fear. The maps were drawn long ago. It is time they were redrawn. Naruto looked at the heavens as he responded. It was certainly going to be one hell of a dance with Nagato. The location you chose is good enough to ensure that there are no casualties. But I doubt that it will be away enough from civilization. Konoha is a little bit close. I am sure the damage might be felt everywhere. Close the location, Zetsu said. He had no care for any casualty. He was merely stating the facts. It does not matter. As long as no one tries to intervene, though, I think only a fool would get close, Naruto said, pausing for a moment. Go. I will meet you there in 5. I have to prepare. Zetsu nodded and disappeared from the tree, going close to the location of Nagato. Naruto sighed and flashed hand seals. He would certainly be bitter if things went in the way he did not think they would. A few minutes later, somewhere in the fire country, Nagato was brought to a halt in his movements towards Konoha when a flash of yellow appeared in front of him. The flash brought Naruto in the attire he has been wearing recently, complemented with his gunbai, 2 swords in each side and a scythe in his right hand. After settling down, he put it behind him and folded his hands across his chest. Seeing the scene in front of him, he raised an eyebrow. Zetsu had left this little detail out. Ah, it seems that you have been expecting us, Nagato stated with narrowed eyes. He was in his younger look and standing on his own feet, while wearing his Akatsuki cloak. But his 6 paths were not with him. Konan was just right beside him, looking impassive as always. Yes, I have been, Naruto responded calmly. Meeting me here means you don't want Konoha to be destroyed, but he would find a day to destroy the village. He had matters that he needed to settle with it. He could not have the village standing after all it has done. But first thing first, Naruto had to be removed to get the Kyuubi. Despite its history and my history with it, I would rather not have it destroyed, Naruto responded calmly. Will you not just tell me where the Kyuubi is for peace? The more you stand in my plans, you are standing in the way for peace I wish to bring to the world, Nagato stated in a quiet tone. Konan merely stood there quietly like she always do when Nagato was talking to someone else. She could tell that it was going to be an interesting battle between him and Naruto. The atmosphere seemed to acknowledge the fact. Your plans. You make it sound like you are the one who came with the idea of hunting down Jinchurikis. Was it not that masked fool who came with the idea? Fool, you don't even know what you are doing. Naruto held both his hands together as he muttered a few words. Winds began to pick up around him as he released some of his seals. The masked fool. You mean Madara. So you are aware of him, Nagato said, not even sounding surprised by the fact that Naruto was aware of Madara. He had suspected as such given the fact that the man also seemed to know much about Naruto. Woman, disappear. I have no time with you, Naruto stated as his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan came to live. He was in no mood to battle with Konan. She was a powerful shinobi, but not as powerful as Nagato. He wanted to battle the Rinnegan, not her. She was a surplus in the equation. Konan looked at Nagato, who nodded at her. The woman disappeared in a burst of papers, leaving the two alone. Nagato went through hand seals. Kuchio's no jutsu, he yelled as he slammed his right hand on the ground. In a puff of smoke, his 6 paths appeared around him. Naruto sighed. Well, I guess I have no choice in the matter. I can't make you fight me yourself without the puppets. It can't be helped, I will have to go through them first. The blonde sounded a bit displeased by the turn of events. He had no doubt that the 6 paths would prove to be a wall when fighting them. Their vision was shared, which meant it was near impossible to hit any of them. But he could find a way to play with them fairly well. You make it sound you can defeat me, Nagato said as he jumped away from the clearing to give room for his 6 paths to fight Naruto alone. He could also observe everything well from this position. Naruto did not respond with words. He charged towards the 6 paths holding his scythe. He shot towards them in some impressive speed, Nagato would agree. The 6 merely watched him with their watchful eyes as he charged towards them. Upon reaching them, the animal path was the one to rush out to meet him. He swung his scythe towards the animal path's head, but the target bended down to avoid the swing. Another came towards Naruto's right hand and attempted to kick him on the head, but the blonde saw the attack coming and lowered his head to avoid being hit. As he did that, the animal path, which was right in front of him, attempted to kick him on the gut with the right foot. But Naruto quickly blocked the blow with his left hand. He was left without anything to protect him. Seeing that he would get hit carelessly, Naruto gripped Ninjendo's leg tightly and spun around before throwing him towards the others who were merely watching. He did not waste time to try to charge towards his target. But Shirado appeared in front of him to intercept his move forward. The path had a chainsaw around its right hand. It attempted to cut through Naruto, but the blonde blocked the attempt with his scythe. While he was still holding on, the big Gakido appeared on his right. He tried not to lose his attention on the Shirado. But Ningdu appeared above him with a spinning kick. Naruto quickly raised his left hand to defend himself. But it was a weak defense, hence he was sent flying away from the paths. As Naruto was sent flying away, he managed to flip several times before landing on the ground. He was forced to hold his scythe in front of him to block a kick from Chikushudo. The kick pushed him back slightly. After that, the path jumped back away from him, returning to the other 5. Interesting, this is going to prove a little harder than I thought. As he spoke, he placed his scythe on his right shoulder. If I don't get serious, this might become embarrassing. He then created 2 wood clones, and armed them with a small portion of Susanoo each. It was only a small part to shield themselves. Naruto threw the scythe to the clone on his right hand. He then charged towards the 6 paths. He was not using his fastest speed to charge towards the paths of pain. He took out a kunai and went through hand seals, ninpo, kage kunai no jutsu, the kunai multiplied into hundreds and sped towards the paths. But it was not just normal kunai, they were coated with wind chakra to enhance their speed and sharpness. Naruto knew Nagato would be able to see it using his Rinnegan. The Rinnegan, like any of the 3 great Dujutsu, could see chakra. When the kunai were about to reach the 6 paths, Tendo stepped up and raised his right hand. Shinra Tensai, he muttered as an invincible force repelled the kunai. Because of the power of the technique Tendo used, the kunai puffed away in a cloud of smoke. But that was not the end of the attack. Naruto had not stopped charging towards the paths. The moment Tendo raised his right hand, Naruto had already held a tiger seal. When the Shinra Tensei was released, Naruto increased his speed and within a second he was in a good distance. Kaiten. Gukakyu no Jutsu. He released a large fireball towards the paths. The fireball sped towards its targets in glaring heat. Before it could burn anyone, Gakido stepped up and raised a chakra absorption seal. He then absorbed the large fireball from Naruto. Just then another Naruto armored with Susanoo jumped above the real Naruto. Before the clone could do anything, Shirato appeared with his right hand pointing at the clone. The right hand had turned into a mechanical weapon. The weapon shot a beam of energy towards the clone. The beam shot out in insane speeds and hit the Susanoo before sending the clone crashing towards the trees in fast speeds. But his Susanoo held on despite being hit by a seemingly powerful beam of energy. Wind style. Sand dust, another clone yelled as it created the dust that covered the clearing. It was an attempt to hide his movements from the eyes that were watching each step he took. This would make sure that the vision of the paths was not as clear as it was. Naruto jumped up holding a blade in an attempt to cut Shirato, but Tendo intercepted him before he could reach the path. His plan must not have been effective as he thought it would have to be. Naruto realized that. Shinra Tensei. The technique hit the blonde straight on and sent him flying away towards the trees. Tendo had put on much power behind the technique to ensure that Naruto was hit hard. But before the blonde could hit the trees, the clone, that had been hit by Shirato, caught him in the air. The other clone that had released the dust previously, sped through hand seals again before the Diva path returned to action. Wind style. Hailstorm. Violent winds full of thin wind blades picked up in front of the clone. The storm had covered a bit of a wide area as it matched towards its targets. The technique was pure wind manipulation. It had not chakra within it. This made it impossible for Gakido to absorb it. The only one who could deal with it was Tendo, but the path had just previously used his technique, so it was not within him to repel the winds. The winds matched on forward taking some of the paths with them before taking to the trees. The trees that were on the way were all cut down by the sharp thin blades the storm carried. But all the paths were still standing as the jutsu died down. Naruto by now was already standing still with his clone beside him as the paths recovered from his powerful wind jutsu. There was little damage done as of yet, but they were still just warming up. Kuchio's no jutsu. Chikushudo yelled as she slammed both her hands on the ground. There were a few large puffs of smoke around the clearing as the anima path's amplified summons appeared. They were huge summons that were on the ground. There was also another summon that was flying in the skies. Naruto watched as the paths prepare themselves to fight another round with him. This was getting interesting each minute. He looked at the clone which held his scythe. The clone threw him the scythe and he placed it back beside his gunbai. The clones then dispelled themselves. I can also play this game, Naruto said as he flashed through hand seals. The blonde channeled large amounts of chakra before slamming his right hand on the ground. Kuchio's no jutsu. In a very colossal puff of smoke, a huge bird appeared on the sky. No, it was a huge dragon, it was as big as the Bijuis. But its scaled wings made it even bigger. The dragon was red in color and its wings were in a mixture of both red and black, and its very appearance was enough to shock all six paths. It was obvious because of their wide eyes. The situation was rather comedic given everything. But Naruto did spare them a glance. As the dragon spoke, its voice was thunderous. Uchiha, why have you summoned me? The great dragon demanded. It could feel the blonde standing on top of its head. It could never mistake the presence of the blonde. Naruto sighed at the demanding tone, but did not comment. He did not like it when the tone was being used at him. I want you to take care of those flies down there. And it will be good practice to test your power in battle as well as our combos, the blonde responded so casually. The great dragon then noticed the flies on the ground before snorting. You brought me here to fight such creatures. It looked further down at the eyes of the summons on the ground before recognizing the eyes. The Rinnegan. So this is the one with the Rinnegan. Fine, I shall test him. Good, Naruto responded looking at the bird that was making noise in the skies. But first let us get rid of that one that is invading your territory, shall we? The dragon did not respond in words, it merely flapped its wings. The action created powerful gusts of winds that reached even the ground. The dragon though moved towards the bird that was also coming towards it. Lesson 1, Naruto said as he clasped his hands together in concentration. The dragon also opened its mouth. Hell's breath, he said as the dragon released very hot air towards the summoned bird. Lesson 2, the blonde flashed through hand seals again. Fire release. Hell's fury, he and the dragon released intense flames that combined and sped towards the bird. But the bird flied down to avoid being burned down. The flames though followed it down. The flames moved faster than the bird could fly and hit it. The collision with the flames sent the screaming bird crashing towards the crowd. Along with the flames and the bird, a large crater was formed on the ground. The bird summoned did not live anymore, it disappeared in a puff of smoke. Tendo watched the dragon calmly as he at the other paths rushed away from the summons to avoid being caught. He could tell that the dragon held great power, perhaps even compatible to a Biju. And those flames that were shot at the bird summons, they were not normal flames. He can still feel the oppressing heat even from where he stood. He was sure as hell not going to have Gakido try to absorb any of the techniques fired by the dragon. If the path did something like that, it would surely not survive the heat of those flames. It would also prove troublesome if it continues like this. The dragon had to disappear or he would be forced to summon something else powerful. Naruto and his summon then turned towards the other summons. The giant dragon then took off, in some unbelievable speeds for something its size, towards the summons. The winds picked up violently as it rushed down the other summons. It then blew by it in great speeds, leaving the entire summons unharmed. But the gusts of winds that were caused by its speed uprooted some of the trees as it passed just small distance down the ground. This was nothing but a sheer demonstration of the power that the great dragon held. The colossal dragon then spun around before turning its attention to the summons. It opened its mouth as it shot down several small fireballs. The small fireballs fell down the ground like a shower. The summons on the ground danced around in an attempt to avoid being hit by the fireballs. Some of the summonses were not so lucky. What caught Naruto's attention was the large multiple-headed dog that was surviving the onslaught. It kept multiplying and now they were two of them. Smiling, Naruto hit the dragon to attract its attentions. Let us pick up from where we left off. I want to see if those oversized dogs can survive lesson 3. The atmosphere is still conducive for the jutsu to work. Fine, let us hurry it up. I am getting bored fighting weaklings who have no special abilities, the dragon said sounding a bit impatient. Locking on the dogs, Naruto went through hand seals, as the dragon heated up its flames. Fire style. Majestic Hell's fury, he yelled as he and the dragon released the hottest flames aside from Amaterasu. The flames had a little of black in them. They went down and spreading out wide as the majestic flame destroyer. But these flames were much bigger and hot. When they heat the ground, they rushed towards the dogs like a large furious sea wave. The flames turned everything to ash upon contact. They were hot enough to melt rocks that they contacted. The dogs tried running, but were no match for the flames. They were caught and only barked once before they disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto stopped the jutsu. But the jutsu had done a lot of damage to the clearing, since there no longer were trees or anything standing in a space big as 2 football fields. The dragon then disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto could only see the rhino summon left. As he fell down from the ground since his ground had disappeared, he activated his complete Susanoo and sped down the ground like a bullet. The complete Susanoo crashed down on the summons in a large boom that created a crater on the ground. The summons disappeared in a puff of smoke as debris had picked up. The Susanoo was on its knees inside the crater its landing had created as the debris cleared. Naruto was also on one knee inside the Susanoo. He then stood up, and allowed his Susanoo to disappear. He jumped away from the crater, but before he could land down, he felt his movements being restricted. He tried moving but whatever that was holding him had restricted his movements. He could not leave his trap. He could not see anything. But just then, a chameleon appeared, holding him captive with its tongue. Before Naruto could do anything, the 6 paths appeared before him. That was an unexpected summon. You truly are a worthy foe for someone to go against. I cannot allow you to live any longer. If I do that, you will only become a problem to my plans in the future, Tendo stated in an emotionless tone as he raised his right hand. You think this is enough to hold me down? Naruto questioned as his Susanoo came back to life again. This forced the six paths to make some distance between them and the giant humanoid Susanoo. The chameleon was forced to let go of him as its tongue could no longer bind the Susanoo. The Susanoo turned to the chameleon before releasing a roar. With a single swing of its blade, the summons was gone in a puff of smoke. Naruto allowed his technique to drop as it had done its job. Now then, Naruto said as he was turning around to face the six paths. But before he could completely turn, a heavy foot crashed onto his chest sending him flying. Before he could even hit anything else, Chikushudo appeared behind him and delivered a powerful spinning kick that smashed on his back and sent him to another direction. Naruto recovered from the momentum by performing a series of flips before finally landing on the ground. Before he could do anything, Shirado was in front of him with both his hands poised towards him. Before a dangerous beam of energy could be released, Naruto brought out his gunbai to shield himself from the jutsu which would have surely done much damage on him. The large beam made contact with the face of gunbai and pushed Naruto back slightly, a testimony to how powerful the beam was. Shirado was confused as nothing happened, but then the gunbai glowed dangerously. Uchiha return, Naruto muttered before he reflected the jutsu back towards the Shirado which was unable to move away in time as it had not been expecting it. The reflected jutsu tore the ground in front of Naruto as the beam was returned to the Shirado. While the path was still flying, Naruto locked on it. Amaterasu, he muttered setting the path on fire. Before Naruto could even look for the other paths, the animal path and the human path appeared in front of him. Both had their legs raised and coming towards him to a kick. It would have really hurt if Naruto had been hit with both kicks. Luckily for him, he was still holding his gunbai with his right hand, thus he brought it forward and both paths hit the gunbai instead his body. The gunbai absorbed both kicks without breaking down. Naruto then jumped back to create some space between him and the paths. He would have to create clones again if he was going fight this a bit fairly. But before Naruto could create the clones, his opponent attacked, Bansho Tenin. Tendo yelled as he pushed Naruto towards him. The other paths who were not busy watched him try to struggle to regain control over his body. Naruto flew right into Tendu's tight grip. The central path held him tightly by his neck. Finally, you have brought me a lot closer to you, Naruto said, confusing Tendo as he did not understand the meaning of his words. Amaterasu, with that said, he set ablaze the path by the eternal black flames. The path let go of him and Naruto did not waste to act before the other paths came into the rescue. He gripped his gunbai tightly and coated it him wind chakra. He tried to bat Tendo with the face of the gunbai, but he was late to act. Shinra Tensai, Tendo blow the flames away from him. There was not much damage done on him, his cloak was just slightly burned. The Shinra Tensai also caught Naruto and sent him flying. But before he could go anywhere far, another path caught him by his foot. The path slammed him into the ground with so much force that he created a crater when he crashed down the ground. Another path came in falling down towards him. But before both its feet could crash into his gut, Naruto put his gunbai above him as a shield. The path crashed onto of the gunbai. But still, Naruto was compelled down the ground further. If he was thinking it was over, he was proven wrong. His foot was grabbed again and he was picked up from the ground. Again, the path spun around with him, making it difficult for him to control his body. Two more paths jumped into the air before the path holding his foot let him go. Both paths in the air brutally kicked with so much force that he let go of his gunbai. Luckily it was tied to him with a chain. Naruto was sent rocketing along with his gunbai. But that was not the end of the attack, the revived Shirado had a missile already prepared. As soon as Naruto was sent flying, the missile was following him. It hit the blonde dead-on creating a small explosion. A cloud of black smoke was created before Naruto finally came out of it performing some backflips. He then landed on the ground on one knee. His cloak was burned, so he tore it off. He was also sporting several bruises. He gripped his gunbai tightly and wiped his left hand across his mouth. My blood, he smiled. Perhaps I should kick another gear into this. He formed 3 clones armored with Susanoo. The clones dashed away from him. The blonde looked up to see 3 missiles coming towards him. He raised his gunbai. Gunbai barrier, an orange barrier erected in front of him before the missiles hit him. The missiles connected with the barrier and exploded into a sizable explosion that picked up large amounts of debris. But Naruto was alright when the debris finally cleared. He strapped his gunbai behind him before jumping away from the position he was at. Naruto landed a few distance away. The Jigokudo, which has been inactive during the battle, was merely watching what his clones were doing. Its eyes were not fixed on him. It was a good thing he had done that. He knew that if he did not increase the numbers, all those eyes would only be staring down at him. But all the other 5 paths were staring at him. He could not sense Nagato anywhere near the place. He must have probably left the place to go on a safe distance where he could manipulate all his paths without having to worry about his real body being attacked. It was a good plan for the Rinnegan wielder. But he could also use tactics, he just normally preferred not to. The animal path was the first to rush towards him in blinding speeds. Naruto knew that if he were to engage in a taijutsu battle with the path, he would never be able to land a meaningful hit because the others were watching him closely. He jumped back from the animal path to create some distance between them. But the path followed him. Naruto ran in blinding speeds towards his other clones. The other paths noticed this and rushed towards him too. All 5 surrounded him and his clones. Naruto merely smiled and held a single hand sign. Boom. The clones exploded in flames. Naruto jumped away from the explosion surrounded by a small portion of his Susanoo. He deactivated the Susanoo because it had served its purpose. While in midair, he flashed through hand seals, but he never got to finish his jutsu, as the paths had already recovered from the explosion and were already on him. The human path caught him by his foot and pulled him downwards. While it was pulling him downwards, the Asura path landed a brutal kick on his face that only compelled him further to fall down the ground. Before he could hit the ground, Naruto activated his Susanoo. Instead of his body hitting the ground, the Susanoo absorbed the crash, sparing him from further pain. Naruto stood up, still encased by his Susanoo. He was not given a moment to rest as a path smashed its fist into the ribcage that was around him. The defense held on, but that did not stop the other paths from joining the attack. He increased the size of his Susanoo knowing that it would break given its size if they continued with their attacks. Naruto merely watched with his hands folded across his chest as the paths tried to break through his shield. It was then that Shirato appeared with a large bazooka-like weapon. It was not a small weapon the path had created. It was even struggling to walk with it. Then it released a powerful beam that even peeled chunks of earth as it sped towards him. The other paths had already made clear for its way. The powerful purple beam hit his Susanoo dead on and sent him rocketing away like a bullet. The paths did not let up after this. Shirato fired more missiles at him that followed him in fast speeds. They also hit him and made a large explosion. Naruto fell down on the ground far away from where he was standing before he was blown away by the purple beam. His shirt was torn, aside from a few more bruises, and a cracked rib, he was fine. Before he could even recover, Tendo fell just in front of him. They were in a bit of a distance from the other, hence he received the full weight of a powerful technique. Shinra Tensai. Boom. The ground where they had been standing was blown up into another crater. Naruto was sent flying another distance away from the path. When Tendo looked up he saw the blonde standing up within his complete Susanoo. Clones joined him and they headed towards the blonde. When they arrived, the blonde was surrounded by 3 clones. Each of them became engulfed by Susanooas. I grow tired of this, Naruto said, his hands folded across his chest. His Susanoo held out its right hand. All the clones did the same as him. They then held out their hands too. Then, a small ball of chakra began to form on the hands of each Susanu's palms before becoming a screeching sound. Tendo and the other paths moved back away from the blonde. The first clone threw first the wind-style Rasenshuriken towards the paths. It was 3 times as large as one he could create using his own hands. And Susanoo was big and added more control plus power when throwing it. This meant that the jutsu was thrown at such a speed that would make it impossible for one to dodge it. Gakido stepped up and attempted to absorb the jutsu, it was succeeding but barely because of the power behind the jutsu. He would surely not be able to absorb many of them. The real Naruto then ran towards the Naraka path which was left standing alone. The Susanoo's gigantic steps alarmed the others of what was happening. But before any could react, Naruto's Susanoo threw one of the Rasenshuriken towards the path. Because the blonde was in a far distance, the path was able to escape, but the second it landed down, another Rasenshuriken was right in front of it, thrown by a Naruto clone. The two Rasenshuriken then exploded in contact before creating two large explosions that picked up fiery winds and much debris. The Naraka path was caught up in one of the explosions. The clone which had thrown all its Rasenshurikens dispelled itself. The other then with much difficulty mixed its jutsus together before throwing it at the group of paths. It did it fast because it could not maintain it for too long. If it had left such power for a long time, it would have exploded on its face. Tendo was quick to hold out both his hands together. Shinra Tensei. This time, he used a very powerful Shinra Tensei that also blew away the remaining paths. But the jutsu had been wide-scale, so it also affected Naruto and forced him to let go of his jutsu to avoid it exploding on his face. The last clone was not so lucky. The power Rasenshuriken did not just allow itself to be pushed that easily. Instead, it merely exploded. Boom. The explosion was close to the clone, it was engulfed with the distance of it. It did not survive the explosion. The fiery winds picked up again, causing the paths to shield their eyes, while Naruto did nothing as he was within the comfort of his Susanoo. He was panting slightly though. Using those techniques had required much more chakra than he had thought. He may have a lot of chakra to throw many jutsus around, but he was not an Edo Tensei, he could get tired. Using those techniques required a high level of concentration, or else, he would be the one caught up in the explosion. When the explosion cleared, there was a large crater on the ground than any to have been formed since the fight started. Tendo looked at the crater to have been formed by Naruto's jutsu with slight wide eyes. That was dangerous. He could have been erased from existence by that jutsu. Naruto was indeed a worthy opponent. He would have to hold high respect for this boy, no man. He could feel that the Uchiha was just getting started. This was the first time he had used his Susanoo for attacking, and he had been using it for defense. If this was how it began when he was attacking with his Susanoo, what more damage could he do to the land? Much better, Naruto said after witnessing the explosion. He then turned his attention on the remaining paths. None of them had died in those techniques, except for the Naraka path. But this way, they would not come back after being destroyed. Shall we continue with this dance? But don't worry, I will keep things exciting. I was slow to become serious in this fight. You are just starting to become serious. Then allow me to say this now because I may never get the chance to say it. It has been an honor to fight with you. Naruto shrugged. I am done with the warm-up. Come out now, Nagato. Before you get here, I will be destroying these puppets. With that, his Susanoo held out both its hands and formed orange blades. It then moved towards the paths that stood their ground as the giant made its way towards them. The Susanoo swung its left blade towards the paths. Gakido came out and held a chakra absorption seal. The Susanoo continued to try to cut through the barrier as the path held firm. But it was being pushed back. The right blade was swung on the other side. The blade sped with more power and speed than the left blade. Seeing the coming weapon, the paths rushed away, leaving Gakido alone. The right blade also hit the barrier. It was unable to break it, but the Gakido was unable to keep it up also. Naruto then moved to the other paths, throwing several swings of his blade and cutting through the ground as his Susanoo destroyed everything in its path in an attempt to destroy the remaining paths. Getting irritated, Naruto stopped attacking, knowing that if he did so, the paths would gather together in an effort to protect each other. He quickly formed a Susanoo bomb before shooting it towards the paths. Gakido tried absorbing it, but Naruto held a single hand seal and more fireworks erupted. The explosion tore down the ground and only two of the paths made it alive. The others were burned, but they did not turn to ash. Just to ensure that they did not wake up again, Naruto moved closer and sharpened his Susanu's blade before cutting Gakido and the animal in half. Seeing this, he deactivated his Susanoo and went on one knee for a moment. He then stood up again and held a single held seals. Gusts of winds picked up around him for a moment, and cracked his neck before looking at the paths in clear boredom. He folded his hands across his chest. I might just decide to leave this place, the blonde stated in a tone of indifference. There is no need for that, Nagato stated as he appeared in front of Shirato and Tendo. I will fight you. I can see that using the six paths technique in this manner will not bring you down. But that is just a testimony to how powerful you are. Madara was right when he said I should not take you lightly. However, all your power is nothing compared to mine. Naruto ignored the fact that Nagato foolishly said his power was greater than his. He found more interest in conversing with the Uzumaki about Madara. He could use a breather. You wish to show the world peace by pain because you believe that peace can only be achieved through pain. Naruto started looking straight at the man. He took notice to the fact that Tendo disappeared in a puff of smoke, but Shirato remained. There are two greatest pain in your life. The first is when you were younger. Your parents were killed by Konoha shinobi during the Second Shinobi World War. It is that day you first used your power. Your second pain is after the Akatsuki had been created. During then, you were doing a good thing, but then Hanzo betrayed you and this resulted in your second pain. Thus, pain was born. Nagato narrowed his eyes at Naruto. You know things you should not be aware of, the Rinnegan wielder stated, to which Naruto merely shrugged. You believe that you were born with those eyes so that you can save this world, don't you? It is not a matter of belief. I know I was born with these eyes. I awakened them when my parents were killed. But yes, I am pain. I am the god of peace. I am one who will bring peace to this world through pain. I only desire peace, which is why I will again ask you to reveal the location of the Kyuubi, Nagato stated in a monotonous tone, eyes never leaving Naruto. How sad. Truly is sad, Naruto said shaking his head. Your eyes were given to you by someone when you were little. They don't belong to you. They belong to me. But I doubt you will believe that. However, you do know that this, Madara, is using you, correct? Nagato was quiet for a few moments before replying. It seems that you do not wish to contribute to my quest for peace. I am not surprised though, you seem to be rather content with how this world is. People call us evil, but we only wish for peace. What are you fighting for? Nagato paused for a moment to see if Naruto would say something, but he got nothing. Talking to you no longer serves a purpose. Let us finish this quickly so I can get the Kyuubi's location out of your head. Naruto cracked his knuckles and removed some of his weapons until he was only left with his gunbai. Fine then, let us get to the main floor and on with this dance. So be it, Nagato said as the Shirato stepped back slightly. Both he and Naruto charged on forward engaging in a taijutsu battle. The god of Omegakure rushed forward and swung his right fist towards Naruto's temple with some precision. The blonde was up to the task as he raised his left hand to put up a firm defense to block the punch. He jumped back for a moment before rushing at Nagato again. He attempted a right hook but the Rinnegan wielder blocked his punch. He retaliated with a punch of his own, but Naruto was equal to it. This time it was Pain who jumped back to create a distance between him and the blonde. They rushed at each other again and ended up locking hands in a battle for pure physical power. They were both powerhouses in this regard. This forced both to struggle in an attempt to break the other. Because physical strength was not doing it, they used chakra to push each other. This caused their respective chakras to clash between them and this did not do any good to the ground beneath them. In fact, both of them had their feet burrowed to the ground. The space between them was becoming violent due to the chakra acting up upon being released. The ground beneath them was sporting cracks and small chunks of earth were being lifted from the standoff. Naruto then looked straight into Nagato's eyes as his eyes spun around for a moment. This forced the man to momentarily lose his grip and stop pushing him. A second was all that Naruto needed to let go of Pain and spin around. But when he turned to kick the man, he had already recovered from the genjutsu he had been put under and was able to duck under his kick. In retaliation, the man tried to kick Naruto while in that bended position. The blonde was in no position to effectively dodge the attack. But he was able to put up his right-left hand to catch the foot. It did not stop Nagato from using that to his advantage. He used the fact that he had caught his foot as a center to balance himself while he moved his other foot. He attempted to kick Naruto again, and this time it was not an attempt, he succeeded. He kicked Naruto away from him but he did not stop with his attacks. He sped off to the blonde again, and attempted to smash him to the ground. But the blonde quickly brought out his gunbai to block his attempt. Nagato jumped back from the blonde, creating some distance between them. He looked up as the blonde finally landed on the ground with his gunbai beside him. He stood up straightly and again placed the gunbai on his back before narrowing his look to the other path. The blonde took out a kunai before bolting towards Nagato. The man brought out chakra rods and attempted to stab the blonde with it on the shoulder. But the blonde threw the kunai at him, which Nagato tilted his head to avoid it. But the blonde then disappeared in a flash of yellow and flashed onto the kunai he had thrown. A Rasengan was quickly formed on his right palm. Futon. Rasengan, the blonde muttered as the smashed the wind-based Rasengan on Nagato's back. He let it go before it sent the man flying away. Not so surprisingly, Nagato was quick to recover. His cloak was shredded at the back but otherwise alright. Naruto figured the man quickly used Gakido to avoid taking much more damage. This meant that he absorbed the technique before it could tear through his skin. The blonde was not that surprised about this. And he only wanted to test the effectiveness of the jutsu. He put back the kunai again and prepared for another round. So you can use that jutsu, Nagato stated looking at Naruto. Then looked at Shirato. The path should have seen the blonde appear behind him. He noticed that they saw two different things. It meant that Naruto had put the path under a genjutsu, which had to be strong to fool him for this long. He quickly held a single hand seal before turning to face the blonde again. Not saying another word, Nagato charged towards Naruto. The blonde did not sit back to watch the man attack him. He also rushed to attack the Rinnegan wielder. Both attempted to kick the other with the right legs, but this resulted in both legs clashing in midair. Naruto retrieved his leg and attempted to punch Nagato on the face, but the man muttered two words, Shinra Tensai. The blonde was sent flying away from man. Behind him Shirato appeared and tried to kick him on the back, but Naruto quickly activated his Susanoo. But this did not stop him from taking another direction as a result of the kick. Then he landed down gracefully before he was forced to raise both his hands to block a high roundhouse kick aimed at his temple. He quickly grabbed the leg on the path tightly and threw it into the air before pointing a finger at the path. False darkness, he shot a lightning beam towards the path. Because it was in midair, it was unable to dodge despite seeing the attack. Naruto had shot a lightning beam that was powerful. The beam pierced through the path's shoulder and rendered it paralyzed for a few seconds. He created a clone and armed it with Susanoo before it rushed towards Nagato to keep him busy. Naruto charged at the Shirato, but before he could reach it, the path had already recovered from his jutsu. It ducked his punch and jumped back before lunging towards him again. Both its hands had turned into chainsaws. While it jumped on him, Naruto ducked under the attack and quickly formed his Susanoo. The last thing the path saw was an orange blade piercing through its gut. Naruto retracted his blade. This should put it out of commission, but just to make sure, his Susanoo fully formed, and threw the path into the air. Its blade sharpened dangerously. When the path was falling down towards the Susanoo, its blade met with it and cut it in half. Naruto deactivated his Susanoo and looked back at Nagato, who had just blown away his clone. He dispelled it, before charging straight towards the man. He held out his right hand forming a flaming ball. Kaiten. Rasengan, he muttered before trying to smash the jutsu on Nagato's gut, but the man was fast, having seen him all the way. He jumped away from the path of the jutsu. The blonde hit the ground with the jutsu. Boom! Another crater was formed when Naruto's jutsu hit the ground. He was not given time to marvel at his work when Nagato appeared behind him. The blonde was quick to turn around to block the kick aimed at his back with his left hand. He began to form another Kaiten Rasengan, but before he could do anything, Nagato muttered those two words. Shinra Tensai. The force of the jutsu dispelled Naruto's jutsu and sent the blonde flying away. But this time, he did not go a far distance. He was able to recover quickly. Upon landing on the ground, he flashed through hand seals before clasping them together. Wood style. Deep forest emergence, the ground began to shake as Naruto spoke those words. A dense forest began to emerge from the ground in an instant. The dense forest with high life force charged towards the god of peace, who simply looked calm. Naruto continued to hold his hands together, controlling the jutsu before it hit Nagato. The jutsu could be used to capture an enemy. But Naruto wanted to see something. Nagato tried dodging the trees without getting pierced by any them. It looked as though he was caught up within the trees and captured. But the man muttered those two words again. Shinra Tensai, the jutsu of the god realm repelled everything that had surrounded him. All the trees around from the dense forest Naruto had created were blown away from him. He had blown them away with so much power that another crater was formed where he stood, and then there was nothing left standing but him. Naruto then rushed towards Nagato doing hand seals. Before he reached him, he released his jutsu. Fire style. Great fire breath, he released a stream of flames that sped towards Nagato. The blonde did not stop moving towards the god of peace as he continued to hold his jutsu. Nagato went through hand seals of his own. Sweeten. Bakusui Shosha no Jutsu, the man spew large amounts of water, filling the crater he was within. The water he released so much that the space around them became like an ocean. Nagato began to charge towards Naruto within a wave. The blonde's jutsu had already been consumed by the water Pain had released. It was also a little difficult to mold chakra given that there was water everywhere. Nagato continued to charge towards the blonde before holding out his right hand as he reached the blonde. Shinra Tense, Naruto locked with the target. Amaterasu, he set Nagato ablaze before he could finish his jutsu. The blonde then jumped away from the man, but there was still water where he stood. I will have to do something about this, Naruto thought. Shinra Tensai. Nagato blew the flames away from him seeing that he was going to be burned alive. He did not do so without eliciting a small scream of pain. Regardless of who you are, you cannot just shrug of the flames of Amaterasu like they were nothing. The man tore off his burned cloak and threw it away. Naruto jumped into the air while doing more hand seals. Kaiten. Guka Mekyaku no Jutsu, the blonde released majestic flames covering a wide area in the form of a wave. The flames were very intense and could turn a shinobi into ash if caught within their range. Nagato released another water colliding wave again. Added with the water already on the surface, Naruto's majestic flames were extinguished by the water. The blonde sighed before landing on the water again. He flashed through hand seals before slamming his right hand on the ground. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. An unbelievable large amount of chakra was released as a large cloud of smoke appeared. When it cleared, the feared great nine-tailed demon fox appeared in all its glory. And Naruto was standing on top of its head. You finally summoned me again, the Kyuubi said, its voice booming around the entire clearing. Yes, I need to use your power, Naruto responded. Plus, he needed to conserve his chakra. He had already spent much chakra. No matter how much chakra or how large his pools were, they could dry out if he used chakra carelessly. He had been trying not to throw meaningless jutsus around. If he was not careful, Obito would no doubt take advantage of the situation. He did not wish to be tired to the point where he could not fight should it come to that. You need my power. The Kyuubi seemed amused by this statement. When I was still sealed within you, you did not use my power. You insisted in using your own power. I am surprised that can ask for help. You are making a mistake. I do not really need your help. I can handle Nagato alone with you. The blonde paused looking down at Nagato who was merely watching them. Kyuubi merely snorted before taking its eyes towards Nagato. The beast grinned seeing the Rinnegan. The god of peace narrowed his eyes, so you have brought the Kyuubi here. This saves me the effort of having to get into your head and then searching for the Biju. Without saying anything, the Kyuubi charged towards Nagato while splashing the water sideways under its paws. The target merely waited for it to come towards him. When the Biju got close and attempted to swat the man under its paws, Nagato raised both his hands before muttering those two words. Shinra Tensai. It was either the Kyuubi was just too powerful or Nagato had released a weaker jutsu because the Kyuubi was only pushed back slightly. It tried to hit the man again, but he muttered those words again. The invincible made it difficult for the Kyuubi to hit him. Nagato made a distance away from the Biju. But this only gave the Kyuubi enough time and distance to prepare a Bijudama. The tailed beast bomb was prepared, though not the most powerful, it was still big. The Kyuubi fired it towards Nagato who saw it coming. The man quickly ran away from the path of the jutsu. But the distance he made was not that far off the range of the Bijudama. When the jutsu went into a large explosion, it nearly got him, but he used another Shinra Tensai to repel part of the explosion from him. Still the explosion created a large mushroom of debris, a testament to the power of the Kyuubi. The Biju was not done with its attacks. It again fired another Bijudama towards the man. Nagato tried running away before stopping to brace himself for impact. He held out both his hands as the Bijudama neared him. Shinra Tensai. This time he put as much chakra as he could on the jutsu. The Bijudama collided with his jutsu, but neither seemed to be winning, which is before the Kyuubi's jutsu set off. Boom. The explosion shook the battlefield, creating another crater, and a mushroom of debris arose and gusts of winds picked up. After several moments, the debris cleared. Nagato was inside on a large crater on one knee. His shirt was badly burned and had blood licking out of his mouth. There were also several bruises and he was panting. It took a few moments for him to recover his breath before finally standing up. It is becoming dangerous, Nagato thought. He would have to admit that the Kyuubi was indeed powerful. He had yet to successfully repel it with his Shinra Tensei. He did not think he would be able to do so unless he sacrificed more power. But he did not need to do that while there was a way to handle both Naruto and the Biju. Yes, he could not allow things to carry on like these. He had to act before he was completely worn out and there was no energy left within him. If that happened, he would not be able to fight, but he could count on Conan to rescue him. But that was still highly unlikely. He held out both his hands as he created a small black orb of condensed chakra. Chibaku Tensei, he muttered as he allowed the orb to float into the sky. It did not take long before it finally settled down and the ground began to shake. He clasped both his hands in concentration as large rocks, chunks of earth began to be lifted up into the sky. The orb he created being the center of the gravitational pull. Everything with range began to be lifted up in the sky including Naruto and the Kyuubi. He wanted to create a larger one given the size of the Kyuubi, probably 3 times as big as the Biju. He then increased his chakra output forcing more chunks of earth to be lifted. This would surely do it. Naruto had expected something like this to happen. The Kyuubi would surely ask him what they were going to do to get out of this one because both were being forcibly pulled into the orb. The blonde jumped away from the Biju's head and dropped onto another chunk of earth that was being pulled into the air. His Susanoo came into life in its complete form. Shoot a Bijudama at the center. I will also throw in one of my techniques just to ensure that we destroy it. We will have to do at the same time. With that, his Susanoo held out both its hand and formed a Rasenshuriken with both hands. The Kyuubi then formed its biggest Bijudama before both shot their techniques. It did not matter where they shot because everything was being pulled at the center. When both techniques hit the center, a large explosion occurred in the sky. The Kyuubi disappeared in a puff of smoke. Everything that had been pulled up began to fall down as there was no longer anything that was pulling them into the sky. Naruto jumped between the chunks of earth falling down before settling on the ground in one knee. He deactivated his Susanoo as he panted. He was being taxed much more power that he would like. After several moments of no action, which both opponents used to catch their breaths, Nagato stood up first. He was still spotting blood around some parts of his body. But he did not mind at all. He went through hand seals before slamming both his hands on the ground. Kuchio's no jutsu, he yelled loudly. In a 2 large puffs of smoke, the 6 tails as well as the 5 tails appeared. Nagato held both his hands together as he stood behind the 2 beasts. I should not waste too much chakra, he said before both Bijuis began to form Bijudamas. They were released and sent towards Naruto in high speed. The blonde could see them coming while he was still on the ground. Both attacks seemed to hit him before setting off into another large explosion that shook the entire battleground. Another mushroom of debris was formed. The Bijuis fired 2 more Bijudamas at the mushroom before a second explosion set off. This also forced the already existing mushroom to increase its size. But the debris did not last longer as it was blown away in all direction by an invincible force. Nagato was forced to shield himself against the debris as well as the Bijus in front of him. When they opened their eyes, they saw Naruto standing in a rather large crater with both hands stretched out. His mouth was leaking some blood and his shirt was nothing but tatters. Finally, Nagato widened his eyes when he saw the eyes of Naruto. He had new set of eyes. It was like the Rinnegan with the ripple pattern, but there were also 6 tomos, light red sclera and iris. It was no doubt the Rinnegan. But Nagato could not understand how it was shaped like that or how it came to be. He was supposed to be the only to have awakened the Dujutsu. Madara had also not said anything about this. He had said he was the only one who had it. Naruto only had the Mangekyo Sharingan. He could not fathom what this meant. He quickly snapped out of his thoughts when the blonde jumped out of the crater and stood in front of the Bijuis. I have already used too much chakra than I thought I would use. But let us see which Rinnegan is stronger, mine or yours. Rinbo. Hengoku, it seemed that some invincible force hit the Bijus and sent them flying away into a great distance. But that was not the case, it was like that to the naked eye. Nagato through his eyes could see that there was something that he had seen. But it all happened in an instant to quickly realize what had actually happened. The Bijus were sent crashing into the ground painfully from Naruto's attack. Before they could react, Naruto disappeared in a speed that even surprised Nagato. He appeared between the two fallen Bijus. The blonde raised both his hands as his Rinnegan glowed slightly. Shinra Tensai, an unbelievable blast sent all the Bijus flying into different locations. Nagato noted that the jutsu was much powerful than he had been producing all day. He then began to charge towards the blonde in his weary form, but the blonde rushed towards the six tails while going through hand seals. Mokuton. Mokuryu no Jutsu, the blonde then held both his hands together as a large serpentine dragon came from the ground and rushed towards the six tails. The Biju tried fighting when the creature encircled around it. But it failed to fight off the dragon as it bound it while at the same time, sucking out its chakra. The dragon held firmly onto the Biju while drying it of its energy to fight. Naruto looked behind him as he felt a rise of chakra. Nagato was standing behind the five tails which fired a Bijudama at him. The blonde then did hand seals before slamming them to the ground. Mokuton. Hubi no Jutsu. Naruto created a dome-like defensive structure that surrounded him. The tailed beast ball hit the dome but was unable to break it. The Bijudama then passed through the defense before setting off at a distance away. The result was another explosion. Naruto did not mind it as he dispersed his defense. Naruto then turned towards Five Tails. Mokuton. Mokuryu no Jutsu, he released the same serpentine dragon he had released earlier. The Biju shot a Bijudama to destroy the dragon, but it did nothing. The dragon continued to match on towards the Biju with all its power. Nagato knew that his Biju would be caught. He was already fighting to keep control as it was. But before he could do anything to fight off the jutsu, the wood dragon was already wrestling with the Biju. Pain realized that he would just have to fight Naruto for control if he wanted to free his Bijus. Nagato then rushed towards Naruto. He did a few hand seals before releasing his jutsu. Wind style. Great wind breakthrough, he yelled, released powerful gusts of winds that rushed towards Naruto. The winds hit the blonde dead on and sent him flying away. But he was quick to recover as he flipped backwards before touching down. Naruto then did hand seals. Mokuton. Keijikai Korin no Jutsu, a deep forest emerged around the surface and began to attack Nagato. But before the forest could complete, the man blew everything apart with his Shinra Tensai. But the forest again emerged, this time it was a lot quicker than the last time. It quickly formed, trapping the god of peace within it. The forest then formed flowers which began releasing pollen which spread across the atmosphere. Perhaps I should light things up, Naruto said to himself before going through hand seals. But before he could finish up the seals required, a large force blew the forest apart like a shockwave. This picked up some debris, forcing Naruto to activate his Susanoo to avoid everything. When the debris cleared down, Nagato was on his knees panting, having used much chakra to repel everything away from him. Chibaku Tensai, Naruto muttered, using the same jutsu Nagato had used on him earlier. Nagato just braced himself for what was coming. But he noticed that he was not being pulled into the sky like the debris. He realized that Naruto was not targeting him, but the Bijus he had captured. He did not do anything to stop it, they were already defeated. It did not take long for the Bijus to be pulled into the sky. It was not just one large Chibaku Tensai in the sky, but there were two. It seems you won't be much of a challenge anymore. But as a sign of respect to your power, I shall show you the true extent to the power of Uchiha Naruto. As soon as he said those words, dark orange chakra began to envelope him and the blonde seemingly began to float within it. His Susanoo became alive, but its size became very big. It continued to rise until it was standing very large. The thing was even bigger than any mountain. When it finally stabilized, it could be clearly seen. It was armored with the armor Naruto usually wore, and its face resembled that of Akiba Sanjakubo Daigongan. It had a long katana sheathed in a sash across its waist. Nagato watched with wide eyes. For the first time since he became pain, he felt hopeless. This was a perfect Susanoo. How could he fight something like that? Not even the most powerful Shinra Tensei could move it. A sense something akin to fear started to creep within his heart. It surprised him that he could feel such a thing. This is my perfect Susanoo. The last to wield one was Uchiha Madara. If I danced with him like this, we would probably destroy this country. I will not fight you with it. If I did that, it would be an insult to my Susanoo given your current state. Naruto paused for a moment as his Susanoo drew out its sword. A single swing of the sword, and everything was leveled down. Nagato was unfortunate to be caught. But he was alright. The swing tore through the earth and the Susanoo held its blade firmly. You were never a match for from the beginning. There are two people who would have the chance of defeating me, Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama. But sadly, both are dead. Nagato could still not believe his eyes. That swing was powerful. There it had separated a large portion of the ground. He did not think that the place could be filled anytime soon. It would probably stay like that forever. Nagato, are you alright? Konan asked as she appeared beside him with a worried look on her face, something which was reserved only for him. Yes, but for how long was the question? Naruto ignored everything. He saw a mountain in a far distance and spoke. Perhaps I should cut down that mountain to show you the power of Uchiha Naruto. He then took a single step forward, but before he could take another, his Susanoo dispersed, causing him to fall down the ground. But the blonde landed gracefully and looked at Nagato and Konan. They looked relieved. How embarrassing. Nagato stood up forcefully. It seems that I can still fight you. Naruto shook his head and disappeared in an instant. He appeared in front of the two leaders of Omegakure. Konan seemed ready to stop him should he try anything. You can fight. But I cannot do that. I would be embarrassing for me to fight with you at this state. But, both Konan and Nagato tensed. I am quite not yet done. He held clasped both his hands together as another wave of chakra hit the clearing. His perfect Susanoo stood again. Now then. For something so colossal, the Susanoo moved pretty fluidly. It moved across the battleground while drawing out its blade. It looked up at the formations that had been set up by Chibaku Tensei. I should free those Bijuis, painfully. And then, the ground began to tremble under its might. After freeing the Bijuis, the blonde deactivated his Susanoo and flashed towards Konan and Nagato. He closed his left eye and widened his right, which was hidden under his hair. Because of them were looking straight at him, he put them under an illusion similar to Tsukuyomi. But he used his Rinnegan to cast the Genjutsu. I will explain some matters to you, foolish children, before I kill Nagato. Chapter 30. Heart of the Rejected Hero. That was a little disappointing, Naruto stated, repeating the same words he had said after dispersing his perfect Susanoo. He was even ignoring the fact that Konan was on the ground beside a dead Nagato. The woman also did not seem to be minding too much about him. Her attention was on her long-life partner. I had expecting to do more damage than this. If things continue like this, I may never have that dance of death. He had to admit that it was getting boring having to fight opponents he could defeat. He needed someone who could push him to his limits. Where were Hashirama and Madara when you needed them? Perhaps he may have to revive Madara after all. How he could be so indifferent and sound so disappointed about the fact that he did not get the good fight he had hoped for after all the destruction he had done, and the fact that Nagato lay dead, baffled Konan. Even she could not be like that in this kind of situation. She felt without words to say to him. What could she say? If he charged that monster of a Susanoo again, he would surely kill her without much trouble. She had watched him battle a man she never thought could be defeated. Yet he did so, even when Nagato had gotten his mobility back in a power boost. He had become even stronger than he was. I sense some shinobi coming this way, Naruto stated. They were no doubt coming here because of all the commotion that had taken place during his battle with Nagato. He was looking at the side of the Five Tails. The shinobi were coming by that side. It would take a few more minutes for them to get here. I better be leaving then, Konan said, wrapping Nagato's corpse with her paper jutsu. Naruto had already taken the Rinnegan away from Nagato. She really did not have much of an option in the matter. The blonde had said he would take the eyes because they belonged to him. That had been before he drove his sword through Nagato's chest. She had to leave now though. People did not really take kindly to seeing the Akatsuki cloak. She was in no mood to face shinobi who wanted to do battle with her. She would probably blow everyone up within seconds. After what she had been shown and told, she needed to calm down a bit and relax before rethinking her objectives. She still wished for peace, but she had been a fool along with Nagato. That bastard probably knew Nagato would be killed today, he seemed to know much about Naruto that much. But now she knew much about him. He probably won't be expecting her to have been told about him, especially by Naruto. The blonde had only bothered to tell them because he was going to kill Nagato. He could tolerate her existence because she still had a purpose his cruel world. I will visit you Omegakure soon. And since I believe that news will soon travel fast, the god of Omegakure has fallen in battle, you might be having some more enemies. But I doubt someone with your capabilities will not be able to handle them, Naruto stated, still looking towards the Biju that was probably unconscious. It irked her that he could talk so carelessly without even looking at her. Was it not the basic of shinobi to never show your back to the enemy? Yet, here he was standing before her, if was a tempter of fate, she could move to strike him down. Nagato was never this careless. He always had his back watched by more than 2 years. Konan did not say a word to him. She simply disappeared with Nagato's body, leaving the blonde alone. What an odd woman, Naruto stated as Konan left silently. He disappeared off to collect his tools before heading to the Bijou as he had subdued. What are you going to do with them? Zetsu stated as he appeared behind Naruto. I will take them to the Dragon Land. They will probably be fighting with the Kyuubi, but he did not care about that. It was the best place to keep the Bijou without having to deal with children trying to capture it for their use. He needed the Bijou far away. He would do well to avoid meaningless battles with Gakas who can't even lay a hand on him. I doubt so. The Kyuubi will probably just ignore them. But the land is huge, they can all exist without causing problems with each other, Zetsu responded calmly. And the Rinnegan? I have no use for it. But I will keep it at the hideout. It may come in handy one day. It is unlikely though, Naruto responded quietly. He handed Zetsu the scroll containing both eyes of Uchiha Madara. Take them to the hideout, I will deal with this and the mess that is coming. They are Konoha shinobi, since it is the village that is closest to this place. Jiraiya is also heading here, Zetsu reported before he disappeared. Naruto looked up at the heavens. Nothing is ever going to the same from now on, he said. This spelled the change of things. He was the fourth sage of 6 paths. Nagato had been the third, and Madara the second. He did what was necessary before the Biju that he had captured disappeared in a puff of smoke. It was best to keep them hidden, for now. He would have to use them later on. He needed to use them, that is why he had even extracted the Kyuubi from himself. He knew where all the Bijuis are located, and a substitute for the 3 tails was already present. Depending on how his patience can endure, he will wait for the real thing. He deactivated his eyes. He could now only switch between the Rinnegan and Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. He could use the powers of both eyes when the Rinnegan is activated, but he could not do so with only the Ms. He had no complaints though. This just made him powerful. The only sad part was that there was no one to battle him in a good fight. How could he go all out without a worthy opponent? A few moments later, a group of Konoha shinobi appeared. They all had wide eyes as they saw the battleground that had been Naruto's dance floor. There were large craters and there were 2 sides where the earth seemed to have been ripped apart. Naruto noticed that Sasuke and Kakashi were amongst the group. The distance was not far from Konoha. They had to have felt the chakra output from the village. What the hell happened here? One of the Jonins suddenly exclaimed looking at the ground before him. Earth had been beat around. She was no doubt in pain over the destruction that had been laid on her. Who could do something like this? It seems like Bijuis were wrestling here, another one commented. It was almost amusing that they had yet to take notice of Naruto. The blonde had already strapped his gunbai on his back, but he held his side with his right hand. He was standing at the remains of the last Mokuden jutsu he had used. The forest he had created had not been completely destroyed by Nagato's Shinra Tensai. It had been fairly large to be destroyed so easily. His Susanoo could walk on it without destroying it. But that did not mean that it could not be destroyed. Sasuke and Kakashi were first to notice the blonde. Sasuke spoke first. I told you it was him given that he was nowhere in Konoha, the raven head spoke through gritted teeth. This damage was much more compared to what Naruto had done when they fought in the Forest of Death. He could take comfort in the fact that he had still been learning to use his Manchuku's power. Naruto had much more power and he had seen those large formations in the sky and the large Susanoo when coming. The blonde had too much power, and what was he doing with it? It was destruction everywhere. Could he not do something for the better of the world they were living in? He shook his head. He just had to be a little more patient. I had not disagreed with that. I just said we should not jump to conclusions before we see it ourselves, Kakashi responded calmly. He was awed by everything he was seeing around here. There were remains of serious Mokuden jutsu and destruction that was caused by intense flames. He could still feel the remains of the heat in the atmosphere. Hey, that's Naruto. One of the Jonins then noticed the blonde. Now they notice him, Sasuke said with a snort. For Jonins they were quite slow. The blonde had not been even trying to hide his presence for them to miss it. Perhaps their minds were just so wrapped up in the battleground to actually notice him. Jiraiya then appeared next to Naruto, the others did so. The Sannin had a serious expression on his face. What happened here, Naruto? Let's see. Naruto started bringing his scythe over his right shoulder. The motion seemed to cause the Jonins to become stiff, thinking he was going to do something. There were some fireworks and explosions. On any other day the dance may have been enjoyable, but I was left rather disappointed as I had expected a bit more challenge than I received. I don't understand how you can say you are disappointed with all these. The man who spoke pointed at the battleground. How can one be disappointed with all that they were seeing? The ground had taken quite the reshaping, and yet the blonde did not seem to be fully satisfied. Naruto, answer my question. Who were you fighting to cause this much destruction? He too was awed with the destruction that had taken place in the land. He had not thought the blonde could cause this much destruction. And if he was disappointed, it meant he could do much more than he did now. I told you I would take care of the leader of Akatsuki, didn't I? I danced with him for quite some time, he was as I expected. The tailed beast bombs that had been thrown his way had been a little of a surprise. His Susanoo could not have blocked the attack. The perfect Susanoo could have blocked it. But he did not want to bring it out at that time. It could have done some much more damage since he could not escape the bath. Pain. You fought him here. Naruto nodded. How could you have caused this much destruction with him? I heard he was powerful, but this is unbelievable. This is going to bring much trouble, Kakashi said with a sigh. Surely, if others heard that Naruto was fighting in this place, they would grow even more wary of him. This would only bring more tension between villages. The tensions with Iwagakure were already high. Jiraiya nodded. I still can't believe that you could do this much with pain. But that is not the problem. While on my way here, I came across someone who said he saw a colossal bird flying in the air. And those large rocks that formed in the sky. Can you explain that, Naruto? Too many questions, Jiraiya, Naruto stated looking above the sky. The atmosphere has settled down. The colossal bird was my summons. Now then, I will be taking my leave. He turned around and activated his Rinnegan. He snapped his right fingers, and a portal opened up. You are just going to leave like that? Naruto did not turn around to face the questioner. There is nothing left for me to do, and then he was gone. Well, that is new, Sasuke stated, not having seen Naruto use a jutsu like he had used to go away. He was also not aware that Naruto had a summon. The blonde did not seem like he waited for someone or something to fight his battles. It was a surprise to hear him say he had a summon. Well, it was called to be colossal. Something big like that had to have attracted the blonde. Still, it bothered him that he just shrugged all this damage like it was nothing. This was not good to present standing of the world. He did not want another war. And he would do anything to stop it from happening, anything. It is a portal to another dimension. It is a bit similar to my Kamui, Kakashi spoke having his Sharingan activated. He had studied the portal for a moment when it had been opened by the blonde. But unlike hid jutsu, Naruto's did not suck things in. The blonde looked to have tore through the fabric of space before stepping inside. He could guess that another portal had opened from where the blonde had decided to take his leave. It calls for further investigation, Jiraiya said nodding to himself. Do you know anything about the summon? He asked looking straight at Sasuke. Perhaps the Uchiha might know since he seems to get well with the blonde. No, Sasuke said shaking his head. But knowing Naruto, he would not have a summon that did not rival a Biju in terms of power. Jiraiya nodded. Kakashi, can you feel it? Yes. It had definitely been summoned here. I can still a residue of its chakra here. Naruto must have brought all guns out, Kakashi responded calmly. But with a summon that can fly and is huge, it can attack any village aerially. You know other villages will certainly be threatened by this. But at least we have less problems to worry about, Jiraiya said. Naruto had said he was fighting the leader of Akatsuki. This must mean he had dealt with him even though they did not see the body of the other man. He did not worry about Naruto failing to kill someone. It did not seem like the blonde was capable of allowing his opponent to escape. Surely, if the man had escaped, the blonde would have moved to hunt him down. But another has risen, one of the shinobi stated. Not necessarily, Sasuke responded. The other villages were bound to become even more wary of Naruto as time went on. We already knew this. And Naruto knows this too. He did not seem to be too concerned about it. Nothing seems to concern that bastard. He always acts like he does not care about anything, another Jonin stated in clear disdain in his voice. He really does act high and mighty like he owns everything. I can't stand his attitude, and now he is only bringing us more trouble than he is worth. If we are forced to another war, it will be his fault, another added. So, not everyone likes the blonde, Jiraiya thought. Well, it was not surprising to know that. Sasuke was the one who raised his thoughts though. Not that Naruto does not deserve to be called a bastard, and I am sure he would not care if you said that to his face. However, I do not think that you should be talking about a fellow Konoha shinobi and head of the Uchiha clan like that. After all that he has done for Konoha and how you people treated him, you still talk shit behind his back. You people disgust me, and then he was gone. Kakashi knew that Sasuke was not talking about Naruto. It was much about his brother, Itachi. He had been told by Sasuke the truth behind the Uchiha massacre. People talked trash about the Uchiha and Sasuke did not take well it. He could understand where Sasuke was coming from. Itachi had been protecting Konoha all his life and yet they still said worse than what the man had just said. It amazed him just how some people's hatred ran. Jiraiya spoke voicing his thoughts. By the looks of things, Pain was on his way towards Konoha and Naruto intercepted him. If he had not done that, destruction like this would have fallen on Konoha. There probably would have been some causality. You should be more grateful that he is not your enemy but your ally. If he had been your enemy, you would have been dead already. With that, the Sannin left with Kakashi. The hideout. The world was surely taking a new turn. It seems that there were going to be a lot of battles that would soon take place. He did not want to turn the world into another war zone. Perhaps if there was a worthy opponent he would enjoy it. But for the good of the world that he was living in and for his own sanity, he would rather not have another war breakout if he could help it. But of course if the other villages wanted to fight, he would be forced to destroy their armies. Still, this new cause that the world has taken was because of him. He was shaping the world for what it was going to become tomorrow. Shinobi had a neck to dislike those who were far too powerful than them. It was the same with the Uzumaki clan, they were annihilated because of their mastery over Fuinjutsu. Other villagers feared them and plotted to get rid of them, and they succeeded. Uzu had become nothing but ruins. The troublesome village was Iwagakure though. Onoki was too damn stubborn to back down. It was not that he could not deal with the old fool for a cage, he just preferred not to have a war on his hands. Perhaps if it had been months ago, he would not have cared. But sticking close to other people was affecting him more than he had realized. Nevertheless, it was nothing too bothersome since he was still in his cause. If he had spiraled out of his cause, he would have been alarmed and would probably be looking for solutions to solve the matter. He already had a date with some of Iwagakure's army. He would show them what true power is. He did not have to be dealing with weaklings all the time if he could help it. Having to fight children would do nothing to him than infuriate him. He did not like having to fight shinobi who could not harm him. He was not invincible though, but there was no one living who could be of a challenge to him. This would surely make the world problem to him. If he could not expect a challenge from someone, how could he remain sane? Shaking his head, Naruto stopped thinking like that. He still had Kumogakure to deal with. Well, he could disarm both villages. How long have you had the Rinnegan? I am sure you only awakened it recently and the fight with Nagato had not awakened it. It leads me to believe that you awakened it before the fight. It also had to have happened after you died, Zetsu stated as he appeared before the blonde. His expression was passive and his tone did not suggest anything but that he knew Naruto had not awakened the Rinnegan during his battle with Nagato. He had only decided to show it during the fight with Nagato. Naruto was not surprised. He looked at Zetsu for a moment. So I can keep some things from you, without you finding out. I had thought I could never keep any secrets from you since your eyes are also watching, the blonde responded calmly. Where are you taking this? Zetsu said, getting a weird feeling about Naruto's words. The blonde had never kept anything from him. He was always honest and always told him everything. He did not think that the blonde had ever lied to him. Did this mean that Naruto may have more secrets hidden from him? No, that was impossible. He was always watching the blonde. Naruto merely smiled slightly. Nowhere, he responded with a careless wave of his right hand. I was merely stating something I had been curious about. You are very good at tracking and gathering intel, so I decided to see if you had noticed this one. But it seems you have not, you are just realizing it after you have seen it. Well, I must admit, I am surprised that you managed to keep something like that from my knowledge. Normally, I would have known something like that, but it seems that you have been working with me long enough to be able to hide from me, Zetsu responded. It really seemed that the blonde was not taking their conversation anywhere. If he had been, he would have been told. The Rinnegan appeared while I was trying to get my chakra under control, after my revival. It only appeared once, but I had not been able to activate it after I had deactivated it. It was only with Nagato that I was able to activate it again, Naruto responded calmly. Zetsu nodded. To Naruto, that must have been the same as not having awakened the Dujutsu. If he could not activate it, there was no need to say he had it. But now he could say he had it because he had been using it. He had not thought that something like that would happen, though. But, he could now understand why Naruto never even bothered to tell him about it. Iwagakure will be soon marching towards the borders of the Sound Country. After that the army will soon reach Otogakure. I have informed Gurren about it. But she does not have the army to deal with the enemy, should I have her recall the Sound Army from their training? Naruto shook his head slightly. No need for that, let the army continue to train. I don't want them to be recalled before they have reached a satisfactory level of power. Taking them off their training will only force me to become surrounded by incompetent fools. So, you are going to deal with the army yourself, it was not a question. It seems I have to deal with it myself. The world has to know that I will not tolerate anyone messing with my project. Onoki has to know that Otogakure is not a playground. I have invested much for someone to even think of getting their hands on Oto, his tone was sharp. The blonde really did mean business. He was not going to allow anyone to think that Otogakure could be taken. He would not even let anyone get closer to the village with the attempt to conquer it. You plan of revealing that you are the true leader of Otogakure. More tensions will grow after this. I believe even the Raikage will plan something once he finds out about this, Zetsu stated. The man was already threatened by Naruto's power. If the man saw that Naruto was the leader of a village that was growing in power. Despite the lack of military power, as people believe, Otogakure was proving to be powerful. It is better to deal with them now before anything happens. If I settle things down with Kumo and Iwagakure, I can see other things quickly and rest, Naruto responded calmly. Dealing with the coming problems was better than allowing them to grow even further. Rest. Zetsu did not say anything on the matter. He looked at Naruto oddly before shaking his head. This leaves Obito. I will handle him soon enough, Naruto stated standing. There is another project I want to start. What is it? He was curious. Naruto had never spoken about another project. By the way he stated it, it seemed that he wanted to do something big like Otogakure. He did not believe it had anything to do with Omegakure, the village was already established on its own. There were no changes needed to be done there. He did not believe it would have to do with Konoha since the village was not under his control. I plan to have Karen restore the Uzumaki clan. It would have been better if Nagato had been alive to take part in this. But the man wanted to die. For this to happen, Karen cannot live in Otogakure. She will have to live in Uzushiogakure. Gurren has a rare bloodline, so she too will move there to create her own clan. But Uzu is just ruins. It has not been inhabited in years. Are you planning on having the village rebuilt? It was the only logical response he could come up with. For Karen and Gurren to live in Uzu, it would have to be rebuilt. Doing something like that would just cause more problems, not that he cared for any of it. Yes, I will have it rebuilt. It was the little he could do for the Uzumaki clan. Otogakure would be his. Karen could have her family in Uzu. He doubted the girl had already started to think of such things already. But it was never a bad thing to plan for the future. With the projects that in the process of being started soon, do you think rebuilding the fallen village is wise? Who will lead the construction? Karen will, Naruto responded calmly. Some of the projects that I wanted to be started will have to be postponed until Uzushiogakure is rebuilt, some of it the least. Once that is done, I can have the other projects in Oto started. Zetsu nodded. Should I inform them about it? Naruto shook his head. I will do it myself. How is the training of the SBC going? The SBC was a special group of shinobi like Anbu that were being trained secretly under his orders. He had taken all of sound shinobi and the ones who had wandered to Otogakure to be trained. The SBC was not part of the shinobi being trained in Orochimaru's hideouts around the nations. They were the elites and their training had been rather ridiculous. In total, there were about 150 of them. Well, out of the 150, 50 should be going to Otogakure in 2 weeks. You had their HQ built already so they will have no problems. I had checked on them last week, their training regime seems to have paid off really well. Good. I will have them stationed there and then force the current Anbu in duty to a 4-month training program. They should return with the others to Otogakure. I am sure everything else will be built after that period. Surely, 4 months were a long time for a shinobi. Rebuilding Uzushiogakure would not take much time, especially since it was not the whole village that was being rebuilt. And everything in Otogakure would have settled down. He would have already dealt with Obito. You are really bent on having everyone being trained to have their power increased, Zetsu stated. Really, the blonde was putting his shinobi under some weight. He had not accepted anyone unless they went through the ridiculous training methods he had drawn. It just showed that Naruto did not like to be surrounded by weak shinobi. If he was commanding an army, he wanted an army that was strong. You know it would not do well if I commanded weak fools. I would probably kill them myself if I led them to a battlefield and they performed poorly, Naruto stated as if it were obvious. I have been busy lately, I have not even sent a clone to check on them. But it does not matter anyway. I have no doubt you would. Zetsu replied casually. Even when Madara was still head of the Uchiha clan, he did not have them train like Naruto did. I imagine the other villages will be very surprised when you reveal Oto's military power. You will certainly have a war in your hands. Certainly, but I will move to stop things before they become messy. That will be after I have dealt with Obito, Naruto responded. Obito was next. Nothing would put a smile on his face other than seeing the man suffer, physically and emotionally. Yes, he would enjoy putting the man through hell. Where did you put Madara's eyes? He suddenly asked. In the safe, only you and I can access it. Since Obito knows this place, he cannot access it, he does not even know where it is located since you made it, Zetsu responded calmly. I thought you would have put Itachi's eyes there too, he had looked for them in the safe, but they were not there. The safe was the only place good for hiding something. Itachi's eyes are not in this hideout. I put them somewhere. But Sasuke seems to use his Mangekyo more often than not, so I will have to give it to him, Naruto responded in a cool tone. He had taken his eyes off Zetsu as he responded. He was looking down at his hands for a moment. I figured you would do something like that, soon, Zetsu spoke, clearly not surprised by this. He expected Naruto to do something like this since he had never planned to deny Sasuke his brother's power. It was the blonde's intention to give his fellow Uchiha the eyes so he too could gain the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Do you think it is a good idea to give them to him, though? Given the recent changes, I thought you would be taking some precautions. Naruto was silent for a few moments before responding. It is a bit unexpected, but then again, he has always had a different sense of purpose. It only needs a little push for him to decide on something. I had imagined that he would change after knowing what his beloved brother was forced to do. After his talk with Kakashi, he probably blames the shinobi world for everything that has happened. To save it, he would have rid of all that is evil. Zetsu nodded, and you are not doing anything to improve this flawed world. Apparently, Naruto admitted, like he was not aware of it. Though, it remains to be seen if I am also one of the things that will need to be removed to change the world. If I fostered a war, my death would bring peace. Hey. That is if you betray everyone and become the enemy of the world. Everyone would surely rejoice if you died, Zetsu added to what Naruto had said. But it would only last for a short time because sooner or later, another village will try to take advantage of the other. Well, that is if they don't change. But if they change, anything is possible. Humans have proved to be surprising creatures. That we are, Naruto agreed. Well, it would truly be pathetic if I died for the sake of this world. Though I find it distasteful to admit, Minato was my father. He already killed himself, for ungrateful fools. I am not going to follow that path. I would rather initiate Tsuki no Mi than get myself killed. So what are you going to do? Nothing. I will allow Sasuke to have his thoughts. It is better to allow children to make choices for themselves. When they get it wrong, you try to correct them. If they don't listen, well. Naruto responded calmly. I mean about the world. Madara fought to change it, what about you? Don't tell me that you are going to just watch it continue like this. If you are going to do that, you may as well bring back Madara and have him start Tsuki no Mi. Naruto merely smiled. I have never told anyone of my other dream, have I? I have always spoken about gaining more power in this world, have the cages dance before me. But I have never said that I wanted to accomplish something that will soothe my cold soul. He paused for a moment. He was not going to tell. I will be going now, Naruto spoke. A portal opened beneath him. Keep an eye on Conan, will you? The blonde was gone after that. Just then a voice spoke behind Zetsu. Well, that was certainly interesting. There was a pause. Despite Naruto telling other people that you are his friend and the fact that he trusts you with everything he owns, I cannot shake the fact that he does not completely trust you, Zetsu. Zetsu merely narrowed his eyes. That is where you are wrong, Obito. Naruto trusts me more than anyone. Ho. You seem rather confident of that. The end shall be very interesting then. The following day it was early morning, when Naruto came back to the village, he had done nothing but sleep. He kept himself at Minato's house. It was for the first time that he had slept within the house. He always slept at the Uchiha compound or the apartment he had rented. But given that he did not want anyone to disturb him, he chose to sleep in the house. He knew no one would even think of looking at the house since he never slept here. Everyone needed some alone time every now and then. Given all he has gone through recently, he needed to be alone for some time. Tsunade and Jiraiya would have been bugging him with too many questions. It was somewhat of a good choice to rest at this place. He had slept better than he had expected given that Minato used to own this house. Perhaps he did not hate his father as much as he hated him before. The man had given a good explanation. Bearing hatred would not do much good. He recognized this fact. But still, a little hatred was not enough to ruin him. Not when there was still some anger lingering within the depths of his cold heart. Naruto stood on top of Minato's house with a look that was somewhat rare. It was not the kind of expression you would see from him. One could never hope to guess what was going through his head. Naruto had a sad smile on his face. Perhaps Kami would be coming down to visit Konoha. It was something so unfamiliar to see the impassive, emotionless and rarely smiling Uchiha Naruto with a sad smile on his face. There were so many things that one would expect and not expect from the blonde these days. But a sad smile was nothing one would expect from him. Uchiha Naruto, no rather Uzumaki Naruto. He had a really sad smile on his face. His eyes also reflected nothing but sadness. Today it was the 10th of October, the day he was born. Today was his 17th birthday. It was a yearly occurrence that he would make up with a sad smile on this day. His mother had died this night, he could say he had been killed by the Kyuubi. It was indeed the Biju which had killed her. But that was beside the point. It was this night that Minato had sealed the Kyuubi inside of him and then he was forced to endure a miserable childhood. How could he forget all the loneliness he felt? The bitterness he felt when he looked at the villagers smiling at their children. When they looked at him, they always glared and made him shrink down in size. It was this day that they said anything that they wanted to say and did anything they wanted to do. He had seen many children celebrating their birthdays. They smiled and rejoiced with their parents as they celebrate their birthday. But he never celebrated his birthday. During those days, he only had to find a way to hide himself on his birthday. But now he did not need to hide himself. In fact, ever since he met Madara, he had never had the need to hide himself. But that did not change his memories of this day. From birth he had been cursed. For the first few years, each of his birthdays was hell while the villagers celebrate each year. Yes, it was during this day that the village celebrates the Kyuubi anniversary. Today would be the 17th time they celebrate. But for Uzumaki Naruto, today was a day to be miserable. He had been Uzumaki Naruto when it all happened. And Uchiha Naruto had no thoughts like this, only Uzumaki Naruto felt like this. And this was his day. It was all too amusing how this village treated him, no rather how the villagers treated him, the older generation to be specific. And yet here he was still amongst them. Well, they could die with their bitterness and hatred, he certainly did not care for that. Was it the village itself that he cared for? His grandfather had named it and founded it along with his friend, Hashirama. His mother had also grown here and became a great kunoichi here. But he still held no love for the hypocrites of this village. His concept of viewing things was really odd. One would not speak of a village without villagers. People did say that a village was made a village by its villagers. And yet he did not give a damn about the villagers. At the same time, he could not stand to see the village crumble because of some reasons. It could not be a mere reason, it had to be reasons. And if it was to crumble, it had to be under his might. He could say that he had reasons to see the villagers suffer. Yes, no one could blame if he decided to drop a meteorite in this village after what the villagers did to him when he was younger. They loathed his existence as though he was some sort of a purge. They saw the Kyuubi when they looked at him. The villagers of Konoha saw the demon that killed their loved ones when they saw an innocent child who knew nothing. How ridiculous was that? He hated Obito, and thought of murdering him, slowly. But the people who had made his life hell would be laughing and dancing soon enough. He hated the thought. He would probably lose his calm if he watched them, and burn the village to the ground with a shower of Amaterasu. But if he did that, it would rob him of his grand plan for Konoha's redemption. Bottling emotions is not doing me justice, Naruto thought looking over to the heavens. Life was truly becoming unpredictable. He had thought he conquered all his emotions. But yet he could still feel love. He had been disregarding emotions and everything that had to do with them over the past years as trivial. All because it was these emotions that made him suffer. Had he not felt any of them, he may not have suffered as he did. But he did, perhaps that is why he chose to disregard them and come up with a good reason for doing so, they were trivial. He certainly did not like to be reminded of his past. It was a little better now. He had released much spent-up anger during Kiri's civil war. Again with Nagato, he had released some anger. But facing someone who was superior, someone who could actually kill him, then he could find the right person to release all his anger. Perhaps after that, he would be free. It was much annoying now because the shinobi could not take much of his punches and remain standing. How could he release if the punching bag could only stand for 2 punches? The black bird flew by the house drawing his attention. He looked at it for a moment before looking away. The birds of the sky could fly around their territory without much worry. They did not have to worry about anyone invading their ground, as they happily paraded themselves within the skies. But they also had a claim on the ground since the food was down here. But when they were full, they went back to the sky. A very interesting life they lived. The celebrations would begin soon for the villagers. They were probably already up making the preparations for the day that is ahead. He would not be around for that. He was going to spend his time alone. Uzushiogakure seemed to the perfect place for him to be alone. There, he would have no one budging him about anything. He could enjoy the peace and warm temperatures within the island. Perhaps he may even blow off some steam with the sea. He did not wish to do anything damage to the island itself. It had already seen much. He would go away and be lonely. The 10th of October was a day to be miserable after all. He did wonder what Madara did for Izuna when he was still alive. The man that one could say was not capable of loving truly loved his younger brother more than anything. There was no doubt that Madara would do something special for his brother. With him, there was no such a thing as a birthday. It was always training this and that. It was always filling him with all the knowledge he could dish out. The man had been so bent on making him powerful and making him stable, mentally. That man did not seem to care about other things. Well, it had worked out well. He was much powerful than he would have thought. He would become when he was still training with Madara. But it was still not enough. He needed more for the grand redemption. It was hard to believe that Madara had changed very much after Izuna died. He had seemed to revert back to his old self when he reformed his bond with Hashirama again. The man became very much bitter and hated this reality more than anything. He chose to see it as a dream, and a reality would be achieved through the infinite Tsukuyomi. Despite all his madness, his grandfather really wanted to achieve peace. Peace, huh? Perhaps I may find a better solution for achieving the peace you wanted, grandfather. Naruto then chuckled. It was a bitter laugh. Uchiha Naruto, the sage who will find peace. Laughable. How can I wish happiness for other people, when I have none of it? The world has wronged me, it is only fair that I pay it back. Redemption has not even taken place, but it will be done soon. I have waited long enough, and nothing is happening. I just need to achieve enough power. When I do, I will punish Konoha for her sins. They think that they can get away from everything. Their past has nothing but unjust and evil. They are hypocrites, liars, and will do anything to ensure that Konoha stays the strongest. Konoha thinks she is invincible. But I will punish her. I will make this village feel what I felt. I will make her live the life I lived. I will strip Konoha naked and parade her all over this world, and when I am done with her, she will be redeemed. Naruto shook his head slightly, and looked at the heavens again. Ignorant fools, they play oblivious to how they treated me. Oh foolish Konoha, I have realized that you will never swallow your pride. That is why I will force you to swallow it, and by this time next year, you will no longer be celebrate this day, but you will be mourn it, you will honor it. Later that day, Amegakure, the village had been her home from the day she was born. Yahiko, Nagato and her, they had always thought of changing this village. They had always thought of making it stop raining. They had started Akatsuki with Yahiko with the thought of liberating Amegakure. They had been doing a good job at first, but then after Yahiko's death, they changed their methods. Being an orphan had made her see what the world really was. It was a cruel place to live. The rich and powerful abused their power to force the weak under their feet. It was truly a cruel world that she was living in. They had started Akatsuki with the purpose of bringing peace to this crying land, and then perhaps to the whole world. It would have been fruitless if they brought peace to their little land, and leave the rest of the world as it was. They could easily be dragged into the mess of the rest of the world if they did not try to change it. Amegakure was not as a big nation like the great villages, but it was not a small nation either. Yahiko had died because of Hanzo, and their organization was almost brought to its knees. They had been betrayed by the man into thinking that he wanted to talk to them peacefully. But that had not been the case. Nagato died that day and pain was born. She had not known that Hanzo had been tricked by Danzo into believing that they were becoming traitors and killing his shinobi. Naruto had told them that Danzo had tricked Hanzo into believing that they had killed Iwagakure shinobi so that the alliance with Iwa could not be struck. The former leader of Amegakure had truly acknowledged them and their cause. But Danzo had gone and screwed it over. Had it not been for him, Yahiko may have been alive at this time, perhaps even Nagato. If Yahiko had not been killed, pain would not have been born in the first place. But she could not excuse Hanzo for his actions. Despite being tricked, he chose to believe Danzo without even asking them about anything. He had chosen to betray them in favor of working with Danzo so that his power could not be threatened. When Naruto was telling them this, Nagato did not seem to be surprised by it. It seemed like he already knew this little detail and did not tell her about it. But it did not matter anyway. Yahiko was dead, so was Nagato. As far as she was concerned, Akatsuki was dead. At least she had not died being oblivious to everything. Because she was alive, she would live wisely. She would live her life to ensure that Amegakure was what was left of Nagato and Yahiko's dream. Nagato had killed Hanzo and everyone who was allied with him to gain control of Amegakure. This was Nagato's legacy. She could not let someone ruin what Nagato had built. She would stay as Amegakure's protector until she died. If she could do that, she could die without any regrets like Yahiko did. He had not regrets when he died so that Nagato and her could live to continue with his dream. Odd, it has stopped raining, Konan said to herself as she looked out from her tower. The village was always raining, especially when Nagato his jutsu in rain to detect any spies within the village. The jutsu was indeed useful. She should have learned it when Nagato had still been alive. You have finally returned, a voice spoke from behind her. She heard footsteps walking towards her. But she did not turn around to see who it was. She could never forget the voice that spoke. What do you want, Madara, no rather Obito? Conan questioned in a tone of indifference. She still did not turn around to face the man. She was always ready for him, but she did not believe that he would attack her. Ho. So Naruto told you. I did not think he would do that, Obito stated. Despite that, his tone did not show any surprise. It was almost as if he was not surprised that Naruto told Conan his real identity. But it did not matter to him. As far as he was concerned, Conan was no longer part of Akatsuki. She was no longer useful to him. What do you want? Conan questioned. This time she turned to face the man before her. You are no longer part of the Akatsuki. But I cannot leave you alone. And the fact that Naruto left you alive means that he has some use for you. It will be amusing to watch his expression when he finds out that you are dead, Obito stated. If Naruto screwed up with his plans, why could he not screw his plans? I cannot let you touch the woman, Zetsu stated as he appeared within the room. Obito was surprised that Zetsu would stand in his way. Naruto will not be happy if he found out that I allowed something to happen to her after he gave me an instruction to watch over her. And Naruto never tells me to watch over something unless he wants it to be protected. Ho. So it seems that he predicted that I would come here. That makes me wonder what purpose he has for her. If it was just to allow her to continue leading this village, he would not have minded if she died. But it appears that there is something going on that he is not telling anyone. Everything is not what it appears after all. Obito paused for a moment. Then why do you stand in my way? You questioned Naruto's trust in me. This is why he trusts me. I never mess with the things he still has use for, nor do I allow anything to happen to them. Zetsu paused for a moment. And besides, this woman is of no consequence. What you need is the Bijuus and the Rinnegan. You should be working on that before Kabuto decides to revive Madara. Your mission is to initiate Tsuki no Mi, after all. That is why you carried Madara's name. Saying that Naruto is the reason you have not done anything only shows your incompetence and failure. You could have captured all the Biju when Naruto was still training. But you waited for him to become strong. You were told that Naruto would stop you from initiating the plan. But you waited. And Naruto has now played his role and he is playing it too well. To Conan, it was like Zetsu was scolding Obito for his failure to do things in time. What do you mean, too well? Naruto is powerful, but he still continues to train. He has told me that the power he has is not enough. I told him that if he had remained the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, he would be having the Biju's power under his control. His response was that 9 was not enough for him. At this rate, reviving Madara will be the best option before Naruto's patience with Konoha. No. Obito said a bit loud. There is no need to revive Madara. I can still manage things. If you are thinking of using Karen, Yugao or Mei, forget it. Naruto will find a way to revive Rin and make you miserable. Meanwhile, Yugao's apartment. The apartment was quite packed with people. Not to say that there were too many people inside. It was just that ever since Yugao moved into this place, she had never invited so many people inside her home. The home was usually in the company of her 2 friends, Kurenai and Anko, and that was all. She did not have any other people she befriend closely to invite them inside her home. It was a respected place that she kept away from other people. Her home was quite nice. The living room was sizable, that is why it could accommodate the kind of people she had called. She was not the only one who had called some people. She had done this with Sasuke. She invited her peers while Sasuke invited his peers. The special occasion for the gathering was for Naruto's birthday, his 17th birthday. It occurred to them that Naruto has never celebrated his birthdays as far as they were concerned. They wanted to make this year special for him. They wanted him to feel something special this year. But the blonde had not been seen since yesterday. Sasuke had thought he would have returned home after fighting the leader of Akatsuki. He never did just disappear without a word. Okay, maybe he did. But that was not the case lately. He would not have just disappeared without saying he was gone without even telling Yugao, or him. This was the second night running, and the blonde had not been home. They did not have to worry about his physical health or mental health since this was Naruto. The blonde had proved time and time again that he was a force to be reckoned with. However, with all his power, he has proven to be careless sometimes, even in battle. But they did not have to worry about him. If he was in some kind of trouble, Naruto could take care of himself, they knew that. Yugao had spent this whole day searching for him, but she did not find him. Even Jiraiya had no clue where the blonde could have disappeared off to, that is if he returned to the village after his battle with Pain. No one had seen him ever since. There was also no way to contact him. Yugao had to think that Naruto was very much capable of disappearing without a trace. He had done it before. What could stop him from doing it again? For all the trouble they had went through organizing these all and the blonde does not show up. It was also presumptuous for them to even think that the blonde would even come here and enjoy the party. But there was a chance that he may do it for Yugao since it was obvious he cared for her. Well, it was obvious to those who knew him too well. But the thought that he may disappear from Konoha had not crossed anyone's mind. Yugao would have dragged him here even if he had been refusing to come. But it was not going to be the case. Considering everything that involved this day, Yugao should have expected that he would not be in the mood for speaking with other people. He is not going to show up. That bastard. I can't believe I cancelled all my plans for this, Kiba spoke, renting out his frustrations. His voice seemed to have everyone leave their thoughts and turn to him. I doubt you had any plans, Sasuke, surprisingly responded with a snort. It was notable that the Uchiha had been a little irate lately. Hey, I had plans. I am not antisocial like that bastard. Kiba yelled back at Sasuke. Certainly, he was not antisocial, no one could argue with that. He was very much loud and talkative, unlike the quiet and rude Naruto. But the first statement seemed to be contrary to the belief of everyone in the room. Everyone knew the Inuzuka too well. Yay, right, Kiba. You had plans with a nice beautiful girl tonight, you had been planning to devour, and you blew her up so you could come here. The sarcasm was not lost in the remark. It seemed to echo throughout the room, and it was said in a low quiet tone. Anyone who did not understand sarcasm had to have understood that too well. Kiba glared at Ino who had said the previous words. The blonde did not flinch under his gaze though, she merely stared at him back stubbornly. I resent that Ino, he growled loud enough for her to hear that. Shikamaru yawned. This is becoming troublesome, he muttered. Kiba, we all know that you did not have plans today. But you are not the only one who is disappointed that Naruto did not show up. But we are all not blowing up like you. The Nara heir spoke in a very bored tone, yet it seemed to have some sharpness. Yes, there is no need to say unyouthful things about Naruto-kun, Kiba. Especially since it is his birthday, Lee stated. Everyone seemed to sigh in relief because Guy had not been present. They certainly did not want to have the strange duo doing their comedic shows at this time. As Shikamaru has said, Kiba does have a point, and I don't think he will appear anyway. Not that I would blame him with all that this day represents, Asuma stated calmly. He seemed to earn nods from some of the older ones. Perhaps we should blow this up and join the others enjoying the Kyuubi festivals, Kiba spoke quietly. Will you shut up already, Kiba? There was no surprise that someone had said those words. But the surprise came when it was apparent as to who said them. It was hard to believe that Hyuga Hinata could explode with such a steel tone. The tone itself seemed to leave the Inuzuka speechless. Hinata turned her attention to Asuma. Asuma-sensei, she started very calmly. You stated that you would not blame Naruto if he did not appear with all the celebrations and what this represents. I believe there is something you are not telling us. Kurenai wanted nothing more than to pat her student on the back and give her a proud look. Asuma sighed and looked between Yugao and Kakashi who had been silent. He then looked at Sasuke who seemed to shrug carelessly. Kakashi sighed before speaking. Come on everyone, gather around. I am sure Naruto won't mind if I tell you this. Everyone gathered around the couch while Kakashi and Yugao stood in front of them. I am going to tell you a story about Naruto that most of you don't know about. It won't be pretty to hear, but for you to understand why Naruto is not here and why he is the way he is, you have to know this. To make this interesting, you should give your tale a title, Kakashi-senpai, Yugao said with a small smile. Kakashi seemed to accept her suggestion. I will call this tale, The Rejected Hero. It all starts 17 years ago, the night the Kyuubi attacked the village. You all know what happened 17 years ago. Naruto was born the night the Kyuubi attacked the village to Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. Before that, I was the one who protected Naruto's mother while she was still carrying him. I remember it well. Sensei had been very happy that he was going to have a son. Lady Kushina had been happy too, but a little afraid of childbirth pains. That day was truly dreadful. We were about your age and the senior Jonins locked us up within a barrier so that we could not go out and defend the village. We tried to argue so that they could let us go, but they refused to do so, Kurenai added, recalling that fateful day, the day of horrors to Konoha. Why would they do that to you? I mean, if the Kyuubi had come, would it not have been better to have all the military power available to deal with the Biju? Sakura asked curiously. It was because even the adults could not do harm to the Biju. If we had been sent out, we would have been slaughtered. Don't you get why the Kyuubi is called a force of nature? Normal jutsu did not work on it. The Biju swatted away shinobi like flies while it destroyed the village. He shook his head slightly. There is nothing that we could have done even if we went to fight it. We would have just increased the number of casualties. I did not understand why the Sandaime gave the order back then, but I understood it after everything. Regardless of how may have seen it back then, the order saved our lives. Asuma nodded. The old man wanted the next generation to live. He knew that the younger generation would die easily if they confronted the Kyuubi. We were the future of the village, and the village would have no future if all of us were to be slaughtered by the Biju. Where were the Sanins? I am sure they could have made some difference if they were there. No, they were all not in the village. I don't know about Orochimaru since he was secretive. But Tsunade-sama and Jiraiya were not in the village, Yugao responded calmly. The Yondaime must have been strong then to kill it, Kiba commented. Kakashi shook his head. Your generation was led to believe that. But our generation knew the truth. The Yondaime did not kill the Kyuubi. It was impossible to do so, not even the Shodai Hokage could do it. Shikamaru already knew where this was going, but he did not say anything. Ino asked a question though. How did he deal with it then? He sealed it inside a newborn baby at the cost of his life. You all know that Naruto was an orphan but never knew who his parents were until the Chunin exams you all participated in. Naruto lost both his parents the night the Kyuubi attacked. While it is not mentioned anywhere, his mother also died helping the Yondaime seal the Kyuubi. She was the one who held it down while the Yondaime prepared for the sealing. Wait a minute, are you saying that the Yondaime sealed the Kyuubi into his own son, Naruto? Sakura questioned a bit loudly. That is exactly what I am saying, Sakura. The Yondaime knew that there was no way to deal with the Kyuubi other than sealing it. So he sealed it into his only child. This left Naruto with the burden of containing the strongest Biju, while at the same time the death of his parents left him an orphan, Kakashi explained, keeping his composure. Naruto's childhood was hell, it pained him to even think about it. Why then, did you call your tale the rejected hero if Naruto was basically a hero of Konoha? Surprisingly, the question came from Neji. Now he knew that he was not the only one who carried a burden. Naruto's burden was definitely worse than his. Ah, good question, Neji, Kakashi stated with an eye smile, but he did not respond to the question, Yugao did. This is the part where things become messy, for the lack of a better word, Yugao stated, in a subdued tone. You see, the Yondaime wanted Naruto to be seen as a hero of this village. It was he who contained the Biju. The Sandaime told everyone that Naruto was the container of the Kyuubi, but instead of seeing him like a hero, the villagers saw the Kyuubi, the beast that took away their loved ones. The villagers did not see Naruto as a hero. They only saw him as the Kyuubi brat, the demon brat. Very few of us saw him as Naruto. But the majority of the villagers hated him, no, they loathed him. I am sure that Shikamaru and Hinata noticed the way they used to look at him when he was younger, Kakashi added after Yugao had spoken. Those two were not so much oblivious to everything that happened around them. Hinata nodded. I did notice, but I could never really figure out why they used to look at him like he was a breakaway virus. Why were we not told of this? Sakura, imagine this, everywhere when the villagers celebrate the Kyuubi festival they would hunt down Naruto. All they saw in him was a demon that killed their loved ones. At that age, Naruto could not protect himself from anyone who attacked himself because he was seen as the Kyuubi. Now tell me this, what would you do facing the very thing that slaughtered all your family? Kiba winced, knowing very well what he would do. If any bastard hurt my Ka-san or sister, I would tear him apart with my bare hands, the teen muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear him. Well, I don't have to spell it to you what happened to Naruto when he was just a little boy, Kakashi stated, seeing the reactions of the teens as they imagined what may have happened to the blonde. As to why you were not told, it's pretty much obvious. Shino nodded. I assume that our generation was not told because the Sandaime Hokage feared that we would treat Naruto-san the same way as your generation. That is correct, Shino, Kurenai said, nodding to her student. The Sandaime also passed a law forbidding anyone from speaking about the Kyuubi or Naruto's status. Hold on a minute here, both Naruto's parents did not carry the name of the Uchiha, how come he is one? Surprisingly, the question came from Kiba. For someone who is often dumb, you did ask a sharp question, Kiba, Kakashi said, earning a glare from the said teen. But unfortunately, only Naruto can answer that question. Before we go on, I want you to know that Naruto was also not told about his status as a container of the Kyuubi nor anything about his parents. So, imagine how hard it must have been for him being hated for no reason and not even knowing where and who his parents were. There was silence as the teens absorbed everything. It lasted for a few moments before the door burst open and a loud feminine voice spoke. What did I miss? Yugao shook her head. Nothing you don't already know, Anko. Now let us get some drinks before we tell some of Naruto's stories we were able to witness while we shadowed him for protection. Everyone got their drinks and some snacks before sitting down again. What do we toast for? Yugao held her saucer up, to the rejected hero. To the rejected hero. To some who were no ignorant, there was a question that they asked themselves, why is Naruto still with Konoha after everything?